Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today. This is your primetime destination. News, newsmakers, talking points, plenty on the show tonight, including our big talking point. The army has taken charge of Nepal. There is likely to be an interim prime minister. We'll ask the big question, what happens next in Nepal? One of the country's top journalists will join me on the show tonight. Also, how should India respond to Nepal's Gen Z revolt? We'll have all the details on what's been happening in and around Kathmandu, plus across the world. There's plenty of news tonight. But first, as always, it's time for the 9 headlines at 9. Uneasy calm on the streets of Nepal after the army takes control. Death toll rises to 30. Over 1,000 protesters have been injured. Kathmandu's international airport reopens. Curfew to stay in place till 6 a.m. tomorrow. Within hours of urging EU to slap 100% tariffs on China and India, Donald Trump now says that India-US talks to continue. Prime Minister Modi responds positively, says India and US are close friends and natural partners. Prime Minister Modi speaks with the Emir of Qatar, condemns the violation of Doha's sovereignty, supports resolution of issues through dialogue and diplomacy, pushes for de-escalation a day after Israel targeted Hamas leaders based in Doha. Amidst political turmoil, block everything protests intensify in France. Buses are set on fire. Roads and trains blocked, nearly 200 people arrested, 80,000 security forces deployed on the ground. Tensions flare up in Europe after Poland claims that they shot down Russian drones in their airspace. Poland claims we are closer to an armed conflict since World War II. Russia says they didn't target Poland in the overnight strikes. Big move towards nationwide special intensive revision of voter rolls. Election Commission of India holds key meeting, chief electoral officers, and asks them to finish paperwork, start preparations. After actor Karishma Kapoor's children file a plea in the Delhi High Court, Sanjay Kapoor's widow Priya Sachdev Kapoor says Karishma's children have already received assets worth 1,900 crores. It's the big family battle. And a brand war breaks out a day after Apple launched iPhone 17. Samsung takes a dig, posts on X, I can't believe this is still relevant. Let us know when it folds. But our top focus tonight, Gen Z protesters in Kathmandu have conducted an online poll to choose their Prime Minister, and former Chief Justice Sushila Karki leads that race. Army has taken complete charge, imposed curfew in many cities. Police say more than 13,500 people escaped jails during protests. 1,033 injured, death toll has risen to 30. So dramatic events again taking place in Kathmandu across the border, with Gen Z protesters now conducting an online poll to pick their Prime Minister. That's what we are picking up at the moment. I want to go across to get a live report at the moment. Amit Bhardwaj is our man who's been on the spot in Kathmandu. Amit, tell us at the moment, is there an uneasy calm? I know the airports have reopened. Is there a sense now that the worst is over, or is the situation still tense?
Well, Rajdeep, the worst is certainly over in Nepal, and if you would have asked me this question last evening, my answer would have been certainly, we do not know which way Nepal is going. But I've seen this capital city of Kathmandu change over in the span of 12 hours. When I say 12 hours, when we reached the safe location last night, after all our reportage, everything looked vulnerable. But that's when army chipped in on the streets and every lane of Kathmandu. And those who were using violent methods to protest were actually, given a straight message by the army, Nepalese army, that violence and damage to the government property or private property will not be tolerated. No arson will be tolerated. In the morning, when we were on the ground, to whether it be the Parliament building, the Prime Minister's office, Supreme Court, everywhere the army was marching with its armored vehicles. So that was a clear message which has settled the debate about normalcy, law and order situation, because in fact there's a Delhi Bazaar jail in the heart of Kathmandu town, and the prisoners attempted a jailbreak there, but within a few minutes you had the army rushing in with their armored vehicles, using force, with restraint, although to manage things there. So that's how things are unfolding right now. And I've just come from the place where the Gen Z protesters or activists, if we can call them now, because I've seen them clearing the streets all through the day today in Kathmandu city, taking everything that was devastated from the out of the street, so that traffic movement can be restored in the city. So meeting what we are telling you right at this point in time, a first round of talks between the Gen Z community representatives and the army is over. This meeting went on for nearly 2 hours, and now, yes.
I'm just waiting. I'm just going to hold you for a moment, because Pritha Pokharal is one of the protesters. She's joining me at the moment. Pritha, are we to say that now
Yes,
the
hello.
protests are over? Now that the army has taken over, the Prime Minister has resigned, Pritha, can we say now that your protests are over? Or are you just waiting to see what happens next?
I think that we need to keep the momentum going in terms of how the protest was about anti-corruption and bad governance, right? But in terms of the leadership, I think still a lot of things are at stake. There is a lot of uncertainty, I would say, because personally, the discussion to this was done through Discord, and as well as the meeting that the chief of army had also involved Durga Prasad and Ravi Lami Chhane as the stakeholders, and the Gen Zs, the representatives from the Gen Z protest side have expressed their disappointment because the stakeholders now are different, So I am, me as a protester, I am wondering why any official spokesperson has not come forward from the Gen Z side as, okay, this is what is happening next. This is what we are planning to do, So
No,
in
but who
that
is your
sense,
leader?
I
You
think
see,
people still are in charge.
Preeta, you're saying?
Yes.
No, but Preeta, who is the leader? No, who is the leader of your Gen Z protest? They seem to us leaderless. Is there a leader? Is there a single leader who can be spoken to, who has the authority to speak to the army or indeed to the establishment?
So, see, there is a lot of speculation regarding this. I wish I could give you a name, but I myself am speculating. Like, people have been, as per the Discord discussion that was happening online, Sagar Dhakal was leading the discussion platform. So his name has come forward, but so far there is no such name that, okay, this is the leader, this person was leading. That is also one reason why the protest got out of hand, because number one, there was no code of conduct in the protest, right? Like, now that I look back, like, so many people have now aligned to different ways, like, I don't stand for violence, but people started resorting to violence. So now I'm questioning if we were following somebody, we were not, right? It was all through social media. So there is not particularly a face or a person who has stood up and said, okay, I'm leading this, or I'm going to be a
So you're
representative.
not justifying. You're not justifying the violence. Am I correct, Preeta? You're not justifying the violence at all. You're
Not
saying
at
that you
all.
all
Not at
came
all.
together on social media, but then this movement was taken over by violent protesters.
Yes. this was something that we didn't expect. Like when the first day of violence, that was just on Monday, right? That day as well, like it started off very peacefully. A lot of youths were on the street, and it was really sad that 20 people were killed. But the next day, the how events unfolded, like Singha Darbar was burned down, our Supreme Court is burned down. A lot of vandalism all over the city. I think things really went out of control, and there was a lot of meddling from I think some political parties,
Right.
or we still do not have any like particular name that has come forward. But this isn't just the Gen Z's doing.
Right.
It is not, because things got like, it was very anarchic. It was very out of
Okay.
hand, and I do not condone that kind of behavior at all. And it's very shameful that we have burned down important administrative places,
Right.
judicial buildings, police offices have been burned down. So, yeah.
Okay, let me leave it there, Preeta. What you're saying is interesting. You're saying this was a social media movement that wanted change, but you didn't want violence. I appreciate you joining me on the show today. Now, remember, of course, the army, as we are saying, has now taken full charge of Kathmandu. After 2 days of continuous violence, there is a sense of calm, and there is possibility of an interim prime minister also being put in place. The country, though, remains on the edge. Take a look at this ground report, and then we'll be joined by one of Nepal's leading journalists. Take a look.
Limping to normalcy after days of violent clashes. The army has taken charge in Nepal, imposing curfew in cities across the country.
राष्ट्रको सर्वोपरि हितको रक्षा गर्नु हामी सबैको साझा कर्तव्य हो। तसर्थ यस विषम परिस्थितिबाट राष्ट्रलाई शान्तिपूर्ण तवरले निकास दिनको लागि आन्दोलनरत समूहलाई आन्दोलनका कार्यक्रमहरू स्थगन गरी वार्ताको निमित्त आह्वान गर्दछौँ।
But the two-day revolt that toppled the KP Sharma Oli government has left deep wounds. The seat of power, the Sinha Darbar, lay in ruins as the parliament was burned down, with government vehicles reduced to ashes.
And we are getting you those exclusive visuals from inside the Nepal's parliament, inside the complex, inside the Nepal Parliament House, where the law was drafted and legislations were brought into effect. This is the main entrance of the main complex of the floor of the house, and from here the lawmakers used to come. The prime minister, the cabinet ministers would take same steps, but probably they forgot as to why they were brought here. This is the entire grand structure which has been now brought down by the Gen Z crowd, and it's the heat can be felt even 24 hours later.
The Kathmandu district court was set on fire late on Tuesday night.
This courtroom and the premises of district court could speak everything, that everything has been destroyed, has set on fire by protesters. Smoke continuously coming through this window which has been broken by the protester, and now this is a real picture of Nepal, which shows how intensive this protest was, and still you can see this fire which has set on these documents, and nothing could be saved in this courtroom.
Several politicians were targeted on Tuesday, their homes ravaged.
प्रधानमंत्री, पूर्व प्रधानमंत्री के खिलाफ का जो गुस्सा है लोगों का, वो आपको यहाँ पर दिखाई देगा, और उनके घर के भीतर का हाल हम आपको दिखा रहे हैं। किस तरीके से भीड़ ने, मॉब ने उनके घर को पूरी तरीके से जला दिया है। अगर आप देखें चारों तरफ तो उनके सारे सामान बिखरे पड़े हैं। हमने आपको भी घर के बाहर का हाल दिखाया। भीतर जितने बेड हैं, बक्से हैं, लोगों ने लगता है पूरा बक्सा जो संदूक है उसे लूट लिया है। इस तरह की तस्वीरें आपको दिखाई देंगी। बेड पूरी तरीके से निकाला हुआ है। इसका मतलब है कि तोड़फोड़ के साथ साथ ज़बरदस्त तरीके से लूटपाट भी इसमें दिखाई देती है।
Kathmandu skyline too changed overnight. The iconic Bhatbhoteni supermarket, the country's largest retail chain, consumed by fire. The political fallout has been no less dramatic. Several MPs announced resignations. Many more are weighing similar exits, threatening a near-complete collapse of parliament. The trigger for Nepal's Gen Z uprising could have been this hit-and-run involving a politician. A government vehicle carrying Koshi Province Finance Minister Ram Bahadur Magar struck 11-year-old Usha Sunwar Magar in Lalitpur. The child survived, but the actions of the minister, whose car did not stop after the incident, angered citizens. From the corridors of power to the streets, shops and prisons, the unrest is testing its institutions and shaking its political foundations. With Amit Bhardwaj, Ashish Srivastav and Kumar Abhishek, Bureau Report, India Today.
And joining me now is a very special guest. I'm joined by one of Nepal's leading journalists. Yuvraj Ghimire has written on his country for several years. He's joining me now in the national capital, New Delhi. Appreciate, Yuvraj, you joining us. I want to ask you at the very outset, are you surprised yourself by the scale and intensity of the protests we witnessed in the last 48 hours, especially on Monday and Tuesday? Did it catch you and others by surprise?
Not really. Not on the scale of the protest, but the scale of violence the government resorted to that was unprecedented and unacceptable. That has flared up the situation, and I think it will take much longer than we think to, that everything comes to normal situation.
So what you're saying is interesting. You're saying it was actually the targeting of the protesters on day one, the killings of 20 people by the state, that has angered people enough to hit the street. Had this been handled better, it may not have escalated. But what explains this level of anger, Yuvraj? Is this been something simmering like a volcano below waiting to erupt? Was the social media ban the real trigger, or was something building up for a while?
Many things together. Rajdeep, one was this corruption, the image of political leaders, top political leaders in the opposition as well as the ruling party, that was very transparent.
They were seen as transparently corrupt.
Transparently corrupt. I've been writing and I've been saying that if there is one thing transparent in Nepal, that's corruption. And the leaders' tainted image, they never took this criticism in right spirit. They never tried to address it. Second, after what has been happening in the US, the dream destination of people, young people of this region, including Nepal, when they are finding it difficult, they want to create their future in congenial atmosphere for themselves in their own country. But this corruption at the highest level and lack of sensitivity among the rulers, that came in the way, and they're very angry about it. And so when the government, and social media was an effective forum to discuss all these things. So when the government banned the social media to protect themselves and their image, I think they decided to come on the street, but it was provoked by the government unrestrained response by violence
and this corruption is across the board. It's not as if one political party is better than the other. You've had 9 governments in the last 10 years. Is this built into the system in a way now?
They have injected much bigger doses in the system. And not only that they are corrupt, they have together authored a way of being immune, like preventing any kind of investigation into corruption in high places.
There can be no investigation into corruption in high places.
Yes.
You were pointing out to me before you came on the show that ministers and prime ministers cannot be investigated in Nepal.
Yes, what they have said is anything that is a policy decision. And in their definition, policy decision is any decision taken by the cabinet. So any minister who can autonomously take a decision, takes it to the cabinet, gets it approved, and prevents all the possibilities of those irregularities being investigated in future.
Am I right in saying that this movement has been leaderless? That there is no one leader out there who represented this Gen Z? There's been talk of the mayor of Kathmandu, Balen Shah, the rapper turned politician, that he is in a way the face of the or is someone who's admired by a lot of the youth protesters, but there is no leadership, is there? Or is Balen Shah a potential leader of the future?
No, unfortunately, that is the case. A movement not having a leader, not being guided by command and control system, at times becomes dangerous. Yes, Balen is popular because he is independent. He doesn't belong to any political parties which are perceived as corrupt. So, and Balen also played a catalyst role in this movement in the sense that, okay, he said, but politically he has taken a very very anti-Oli position there. But, and he said, I am past 28, I don't belong to your generation, so you lead it, but my supports are there. That really helped people to get mobilized. They saw a face in Balen there, but Balen has definitely not been tested. You know, he doesn't have any other past experience, but he is a well-known figure, a popular figure among the youth, and the fact that he took position against Oli.
And very interestingly now, the Gen Z protesters have started an online poll, and they are claiming that Sushila Karki, the former Chief Justice, will now become the acting Prime Minister. Do you see that happening? Who is she? Is she a crusader against corruption?
I'll say that Sushila Karki is the first woman Chief Justice and would be the first woman Prime Minister in Nepal.
She will be the Prime Minister.
Yeah, and the connect is because after she demitted the office 7 years ago, she publicly started speaking against corruption, and there is a connectivity, this anti-corruption movement, and she has that image. But she doesn't have definitely the experience of running the country, holding ministerial position in the past, but that image, and she was very critical of the political interference in judiciary, the corruption, and so she must have got the imagination.
What role do you see, Yuvraj, the army playing? They've taken over the streets at the moment to maintain law and order, but you don't see the army playing any greater role. Will now they just allow an interim government, hold fresh elections, maybe even change the constitution? Do you see that happening?
Yeah, I think for all practical purposes, this constitution is gone, this system is gone.
Constitution is gone?
Is gone.
So the 2015 constitution
is gone.
Is gone. Will there be a new constitution?
It has to be. There has to be a new constitution because a president and prime minister, all the judges, are being protected by army in unknown camps, and no visibility of the government in one place. Then army takes the control of the situation under whose command we don't know. So this constitution is gone. But army for the first time in Nepal has accepted a political role under a general consensus. That is something new, because with political parties perceived as corrupt, their leaders perceived as corrupt, the army appears to be the only state-bearing institution in the country at the moment. So they are playing that role.
You know, what we saw, Yuvraj, in Bangladesh last year was that the student protests also turned somewhere into anti-India protests. Will we see that in Nepal? Is that a fear? Or these protests are not about India at all? They are about problems of Nepal, poverty, unemployment, misgovernance, nepotism, the problems of Nepal, not directed at India.
Yeah, Rajdeep, the present moment is definitely against corruption in high places in Nepal. But Nepal is definitely a strategically important place for any stakeholders, distant and far neighbors, like US has its, India is there, China is there, and in any emerging situation, the stakeholder external forces will, accept that position and try to further their interest. But Nepalese have seen that 2006 situation was bungled, because when Maoist peace process began to bring the Maoists to the main political spectrum, one side of the conflict that included monarchy and traditional forces, they were excluded. It doesn't happen anywhere. It was like South Africa's like Nelson Mandela not wanting to work with the apartheid regime for, that Nepal is paying the price for that, and India's role was quite negative in that sense, up to, like bringing parties together for peace process was appreciated. But when you insist that one section of the conflict is not included, then that spoiled the whole thing.
So therefore what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is this is an eruption of anger that has been triggered by a long period of corruption and no accountability in the system.
Yes.
You believe it will lead to a change in the constitution of Nepal. You believe that the Chief Justice will become an acting Prime Minister, and maybe 6-12 months down the line, Nepal will have a fresh election where maybe some of these young faces will actually take prominent positions in government. Do you see this youth revolution actually resulting in a new kind of politics for Nepal?
I think I hope so. But one thing they have to be clear that like you were interviewing one of the protester, and they have to own the responsibility for this violence. They have to condemn it. They have to bring the culprits to justice. Otherwise, a movement not under control of its leaders spoils.
So who was responsible for the violence? You believe that some of these protesters included anti-social element, there were jailbreaks, there were a hotel, the Marriott hotel was burned. Did anti-social elements take it over?
Yes, I think this, young people who were, looking at the corruption angle, they didn't realize there are many dimensions. There are possibilities of infiltration of vested political groups. There are a possibility of infiltration by criminals and all that. They didn't anticipate this. But that it has happened now. They should at least ensure, now that they will be having an influence in the government, they must ensure that the culprits are brought to justice.
One final question. Are you more optimistic about Nepal's future as a result of the last 72 hours? Or do you fear that Nepal is heading for chronic instability?
I'd say that I'm optimistic in the sense that youth have started thinking about their future and the future of the country, and they have come in the street. They should be careful, but it gives space for hope.
And also, interestingly, Yuvraj, you told me it all started with one Facebook post. One Facebook post, tomorrow's Nepal, or worded along those lines, triggered this revolution. In that sense, Nepal has set a precedent. This could be called, at least in South Asia, possibly the first kind of digital revolution that we've seen.
Yeah, digital, space becomes very vibrant and sometimes constructive and sometimes destructive forum for debate and seeking addressal to many problems. Let's hope where it goes.
Okay. Yuvraj Ghimire, for giving us your perspective as someone who's tracked your country for many years. All I can wish is your wonderful, beautiful country returns to calm sooner rather than later. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Now, as Yuvraj says, an element of calm may be slowly returning, but it's an uneasy calm. And caught in the crossfire were many Indians, tourists who had gone to, of course, look at the wonders of the Himalayan Republic, but instead found themselves caught in a battle zone. Take a look.
After 2 days of mayhem, Nepal picks up the pieces. Hundreds of Indian tourists, traders and students are stranded in the Himalayan nation with violent protests leading to cancellation of flights over the last 2 days. Many of them posted videos on social media seeking government intervention.
मैं यहाँ पोखरा नेपाल में फंसी हुई हूँ। मैं यहाँ पे एक वॉलीबॉल लीग होस्ट करने आई थी और अभी फ़िलहाल हमारा जो होटल है जहाँ पे मैं रुकी थी वो जला दिया गया है। मेरा सारा लगेज, मेरा सारा सामान मेरे रूम में था और वो होटल को पूरा जला दिया। मैं स्पा में थी और वहाँ पर पीछे मेरे लोग भाग रहे थे बहुत बड़े डंडे लेके और मैं जैसे तैसे अपनी जान बचा के बस वहाँ से बाहर निकली हूँ।
Outside the Tribhuvan International Airport on Tuesday, India Today team met a group of pilgrims.
अभी तो फ्लाइट तो सब बंद है और जो बाहर का माहौल है वो बहुत डेंजर है। तो हमारा दर्शन तो हो गए पशुपतिनाथ का, अभी मंदिर भी बंद किया है, सब बंद किया है।
आपको बाहर घूमना नहीं है और किसी से बात नहीं करनी ज़्यादा। बाहर कुछ काम तो आपका है नहीं, लेकिन जाने का रहेगा तो एक दो लोग जा सकते हैं, ग्रुप से जाना नहीं है, होटल में रहना है और हमेशा मोबाइल साथ में रखो, जिसका कांटेक्ट चालू है, फ़ोन चालू है।
Many tourists posted video giving updates, reassuring families back home.
हम यहाँ पे सुरक्षित हैं, हमारे साथ दूसरे भारतीय नागरिक और दूसरे देश के लोग भी यहाँ पे रुके हुए हैं। हमारा कांटेक्ट यहाँ गुजरात की सरकार और केंद्रीय सरकार के साथ संपर्क बना हुआ है और इंडियन एम्बेसी भी हमें सतत संपर्क में रही हुई है।
हम लोग काठमांडू हैं, पशुपतिनाथ के दर्शन करने के लिए आए थे। 4 फैमिलियाँ हम लोगों अपनी निजी गाड़ी से आए थे, लेकिन मोदी जी से हमारी यही रिक्वेस्ट है कि हम लोगों को इंडिया वापस बुलवाया जाए। हम लोग यहाँ पे बहुत कष्ट में हैं।
Nearly 200 people from Andhra Pradesh are stuck in Nepal.
బాధ్యత అంటే నేపాల్లో ఆందోళన జరుగుతున్నాయి. అక్కడ ఆందోళన జరిగితే 200 మంది తెలుగు వాళ్ళు అక్కడ చిక్కుకుపోయారు. ఆ సమయంలో ఎవరైతే హెచ్ఆర్ మినిస్టర్ ఉన్నాడో లోకేష్ గారిని రియల్ టైం గవర్నెన్స్ లో ఉండి మానిటర్ చేయమని ఆదేశాలు ఇచ్చాను. ఇది జవాబుదారీతనం అవునా కాదా అని మిమ్మల్ని అడుగుతున్నా.
With the Civil Aviation Authority of Nepal announcing the Tribhuvan Airport in Kathmandu will resume operations on Wednesday itself, stranded Indians are hoping they can return home soon. With Amit Bhardwaj, Bureau Report, India Today.
And in news just coming in, we're getting more breaking news on that story. Air India has decided to start special flights to and from Nepal. Flights will directly operate from Delhi to Kathmandu. This is part of a move to bring back the stranded Indians in Nepal. The scheduled operations to resume from tomorrow. Remember, as we are saying, several Indians have been stuck in Nepal due to the violence. So clearly the situation has been alarming enough for special flights to start. Which brings me to my next guest on the news today. So how should New Delhi respond to what's happening in Nepal? Joining me now, a very special guest, Rajdeep, former ambassador of India to Nepal between 2013 and 17, a very crucial period, and author of the Kathmandu Dilemma. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Ray. How should India respond? Should India have a hands-off approach to what happens in Nepal, or is it simply impossible, given our strong relationship with Nepal, for India to really keep its hands off what's happening at the moment in Nepal?
Well, Nepal is a critical relationship for India, and it's a very, very deep, it's a fraternal relationship. So clearly, India cannot have a hands-off policy. And historically, India has always supported popular aspirations, people's aspirations for whatever system they want. And I think India's policy should remain the same. And we should really support whatever new dispensation is going to emerge out of all this chaos. Some steps are already being taken, and I'm sure the government of India is also closely monitoring and is also in touch with all the political forces in Nepal.
But given the rapid flow of developments, Mr. Ray, do you fear somewhere that we were caught a bit off guard? There are those who are likening what's happening in Nepal to what happened in Bangladesh only a year ago, student protests that spiraled out of control. Do you believe that we've been caught napping, or that we didn't expect it to reach the proportions it did so quickly?
I don't think anyone was caught napping. Nobody could have anticipated the magnitude of the protests, and especially on the second day. And I think that was in part a reaction to the killing of 19 students the day before. Had the situation been handled differently, had the Prime Minister resigned in time, had the protesters not been killed, I don't think we would have seen the kind of situation that we saw yesterday. The other thing is, these are students, Nepalese students, and that's the way the protest started. But I think yesterday, as the issue dragged on, perhaps other elements also got into the act, and there was some looting and vandalism. And, all the state institutions have been burnt down. So it's a bad situation, but I understand that the army chief is in touch with Gen Z's representatives, and they're trying to see what kind of interim arrangements can be made.
Which brings me to a question that's often asked whenever there's a crisis in Nepal, Ambassador Ray, that such situations, particularly with anti-social elements at times taking over, can also turn into anti-India sentiment. We've seen that happen on occasion in the past. Do you see this as very different, a purely internal issue caused by anger against joblessness and misgovernance? There is no anti-India angle here.
So I largely see this as a homegrown protest. And, the banning of the social media apps was only the trigger. There's a long, for several months, even years, there's been a lot of resentment. And, there has been a feeling that the political leaders have not delivered development to the people. My worry, of course, is that people might conflate this with the Constitution of 2015. Who do you blame for the non-delivery of development of jobs? Is it the political leaders? Is it the Constitution? And, if you enter into the latter part of this kind of thinking, then you're entering very, very dangerous waters, because the 2015 Constitution itself was a negotiated compromise between the diverse elements of Nepalese society and was forged in the aftermath of the violent Maoist insurgency and the Madhesi Andolans. So I think it's very important to keep that in mind.
Because since the monarchy's abolition in 2008, Nepal has seen 14 governments. Since the constitution in 2015, it's seen 9 governments. Is there a chronic instability built in which should worry India? Because having a Himalayan republic on our borders with chronic instability can be a destabilizing factor. How worrying should that be for India, this chronic instability at the moment in Nepal?
This is one of the problems. There is this chronic instability because they have a mixed electoral system. It's a combination of first past the post and proportional representation. As a result, nobody really gets an absolute majority. So this is inbuilt into the system. But what I'm trying to say is that certainly the system needs to be improved and can be improved. But, the question is whether you work with the present system or you jettison the system and, come up with something different. And if it's the latter case, then I think we're, heading or looking at very different scenarios.
So what should India's role then be? Can India play a stabilizing role, or will any role played by India be seen in the present environment as interference in Nepal's internal politics?
No, I don't think so. I think the situation is far too serious within Nepal. It's in India's interest to have stability in Nepal. It's in India's interest to work with whichever dispensation arises. It's in India's interest to support stabilization in Nepal. We have very good relations with the Nepalese army. We have across-the-board contacts with Nepalese political forces, and I'm sure we are engaged with each of them. So I think India's role right now should be a supporter to what the people of Nepal want.
How easy is that, though? You were, of course, in Nepal. Remember, I recall during the blockade that took place, it became very contentious, controversial at times, the informal blockade or unofficial blockade at the time. Is it easy for India, being this large country, to be able to play any kind of role? Because as I said earlier, the moment we do, we could be accused of being the big brother or the big bully. So do we have to navigate this issue very, very carefully, not be seen to be taking any side at all?
Well, absolutely. I mean, but this is something that we've known for the last 70 years, and this has to be factored into our policy. So there's no doubt about it. And, this is a fact of life. We have to live with this. But given that, how do we support and stabilize the situation in Nepal, which is in Nepal's interest and in our interest? And we have to be engaged. Today, the situation is very different from the situations in the past, because earlier you had established political parties. Today, you have these new political forces that are relatively unknown. Of course, some of them are quite well known, like the mayor of Kathmandu, who's very popular, or the leader of the Rashtriya Swatantra Party, who's just been released from jail and is also very popular. So we have to reach out to the youths, to the newer elements of society in Nepal. We are doing that. We need to do much more of that, because they are going to control the reins of power in Nepal in the foreseeable future.
So does that call for a complete reset in the way we look at this new generation which has emerged, which has taken to the streets in this unprecedented manner, expressing their anger against joblessness, against nepotism, corruption, misgovernance? Do we have to have a complete reset of the way we look at Nepal, given these new forces that are emerging there?
Well, I don't think diplomacy ever involves a complete reset, but certainly the emphasis and the priorities have to be adapted, and they must respond to the emerging situation. And now that political power is really going to be with the Gen Z or the young people, I think we've got to make every effort that we can to reach out to them.
So net, would I be right in concluding that our priority at the moment should be to strike some kind of a new relationship, a more durable relationship with these new forces emerging in Nepal, engage with them, dialogue with them, is the way forward, rather than simply looking at previous old historical and cultural ties?
Well, certainly we need to look at our historical and cultural ties and the people-to-people relationship, but we need to build more on that, and we need to look at the economic relationship, the connectivity that we have, and of course the focus has to be the youth. The bulk of the people in Nepal are the youth. And in the past, perhaps they did not directly control the levers of power, but today, they're in the process of achieving that. So clearly the focus has to remain on what we've been doing, but new dimensions have to be added to our diplomacy in a very, very focused and significant way.
Ranjit Ray, for speaking to me. I appreciate you joining us and sharing your wisdom. Thank you very much. Okay, from our special focus on Nepal, let's turn to another big foreign policy challenge that India will be facing. Is there a thaw in India-US ties or not? Well, US President Donald Trump is doing what Donald Trump does, keeps everyone guessing. He's blown hot and cold over the last 24 hours. In a post on Truth Social, he has praised the Indo-US partnership, praised Prime Minister Modi, and said that trade negotiations with India were continuing, and has expressed optimism about an eventual breakthrough. And he says he will be speaking to Prime Minister Modi in the coming weeks. Mr. Modi has responded by echoing the optimism, the Prime Minister saying talks will unlock the limitless potential of bilateral talks. Now that's the good news. The not so good news is that Donald Trump is also pushing the European Union to join the United States in slapping tariffs on China and India of 100%, arguing that these are the two biggest importers of Russian crude oil. Remember, all of this is coming even as the Ukraine war continues to escalate. NATO fighter jets have shot down multiple Russian drones that violated Polish airspace during an attack on Ukraine. I'm joined at this moment by Raymond Vickery, Senior Associate Chair on India and Emerging Asia at Washington, D.C. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Vickery. What's your sense? How are we to now look at Donald Trump 24 hours? One moment says 100% tariffs on India and China. Next moment says that India and the United States are about to resume their trade talks.
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think it's useful to step back and understand that the relationship between the U.S. and India is very, very important for both of these great democracies. That having been said, in order to have a plan for waging peace and prosperity, you have to have a strategy and you have to have partners. Unfortunately, President Trump does not subscribe to that. He sees things in his egoistic, narcissistic kind of way. That everything is like a real estate transaction rather than a relationship. And it is to be welcomed that Prime Minister Modi, Minister Goyal have been very temperate and have not succumbed to sort of the outlandish up and downs of Donald Trump's pronouncements, because I think they realize that this relationship is among the most important in the world. The business of 100% tariffs in regard to Russia and Ukraine, again, has to be taken with a grain of salt, because President Trump has shown he's up and down on that as well. He said he was going to solve this on day one. That he and Putin were great friends, and it would happen that way. That's not the way in which international relations needs to be conducted. I do subscribe to the proposition that India needs to show more leadership in regard to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This is the greatest transgression of the principles of the UN Charter against non-imperialism, taking over somebody else's territory. And India has stood foursquare behind those principles. But this is not the way to do it, to shake a sledgehammer, say 100% tariffs, without really regard to what you're doing in regard to your own imports, in regard to what Europe is doing with its imports, much less China, which is really the fly in the ointment here. If China didn't stand up for Russia, they wouldn't have the wherewithal to continue yet for another day. So the pronouncements of the Prime Minister, the so-called thaw, are to be welcome, but we've got to get back to some semblance of organizational adherence to constitutional values, rather than just going on what seems to be most in Donald Trump's interest in his drive to get the Nobel Peace Prize.
But do you then see a ray of hope that the trade talks could begin in a couple of weeks, given what the president says? Can India trust the president at face value, given all the contradictory statements that he's made in the last month? Do you believe that the trade talks now will resume? Or do the two leaders need to pick up the phone first and not just dialogue over social media?
India cannot take Donald Trump at face value. The relationship, which was moving along for the last 30, 35 years, in which I've been very deeply involved in, has been damaged more in 24 hours than we were able to make progress in 30 years. That having been said, Donald Trump is mercurial. He wants to do what's in his best interest. It's a very self-centered approach. Everybody knows that. And now I think that the negotiators, particularly on the Indian side, appreciate that. The problem is not with the negotiation and the deal. The problem is with Donald Trump and what he feels are in the interest of getting him a Nobel Peace Prize and making him what he thinks he is, the great man of the 21st century. There was, as you recall, almost a free trade agreement reached in Donald Trump's first administration. And my information is that both sides really had come to an agreement before Donald Trump came in and said, no, I'm going to get more. India cannot give up on its core interests, whether they be in dairy, whether they be in agriculture. But there are a lot of things that can be done around the edges, and I'm sure that Minister Goyal and the Prime Minister are working that. So what we hope to be able to navigate this very difficult situation and get back to the upward trend that we've had in U.S.-India relations for the last 30 years.
Well, Mr. Vikri, on that note, on that optimistic note, let's hope that we've seen some kind of light at the end of what's been a pretty dark tunnel over the last few weeks, given the kind of statements that have emanated from Washington. But as always, appreciate you joining me here on the News Today. You're watching the News Today. Let's turn to tonight's ground report, and our Get Real India story comes from Chhattisgarh, which has become the latest state where Ayushman Bharat services are being stopped by private hospitals. Many of them are claiming that they haven't been compensated for the work they do under the health insurance scheme. Is Ayushman Bharat under the scanner? Take a look. Sumi Rajapan reports.
Ayushman Bharat, the scheme meant to provide free treatment to the poor, has hit turbulence in Chhattisgarh. Private hospitals claim nearly 200 crore rupees in pending dues. Many have stopped treatment under the scheme.
When the Association of Healthcare Providers, or AHPI, announced suspension of the scheme for 5 days, and they cited delays in reimbursement of payments by the state government as their reason. And they said that it is almost unviable for them to continue services here. While some patients are still getting treatment under the scheme, most patients are being turned away or are being demanded in cash.
पिछले 7 सालों में पैकेज रिवीजन नहीं हुआ है। मरीजों को यदि आउट ऑफ द पॉकेट एक्सपेंसेस कार्ड होने के बावजूद यदि देना पड़ रहा है, तो मुझे लगता है कि सरकार को इसके बारे में सहानुभूतिपूर्वक विचार करने की जरूरत है।
Hospitals claim several bills are stuck at multiple levels, while many have been rejected, shifting the financial burden to hospitals.
अगर आप कोई योजना लाते हैं, उस योजना का एक बजट होता है। आप पिछले साल 3000 करोड़ देते हैं, इस साल 1500 करोड़ का आपने रखा हुआ है। आप खुद जान रहे हैं कि आधे से कम कर दिया आपने बजट, और फिर आप बोलते हैं कि आप आयुष्मान में इलाज करिए। जी। तो ये पॉसिबल तो नहीं है।
अभी कुछ दिनों से सरकार द्वारा पेमेंट करना चालू हुआ है। अभी सांकेतिक हड़ताल कर रहे हैं कि हम 5 से 6 दिन जारी रखेंगे। हम चाहते हैं कि सरकार की तरफ से हमारी जितनी भी पेंडिंग केसेस है या ऑडिट है, उसको प्रॉपर ऑडिट हो और जो भी रिजेक्शन हो रहा है वो सॉल्व आउट हो जाए।
While some patients are still being treated under the scheme, others are being turned away or asked to pay in cash.
कुछ में लगता है, कुछ में नहीं लगता है। हमको लगेगा इसमें पैसा, तो हम लोग से 50,000 वहाँ जमा करवाए, उसके बाद में ऑपरेशन वो शुरू करवाए।
हमन गरीब आदमी, हमन के तो सरकार दे ही से, तो हम 5 लाख का, तो हम कहाँ पाई पैसा। इसने कहन तो कहिस कि नहीं होए, तुमन हटावा जब पैसा खोज के ले लान।
हम लोग कुछ भी होता था घर में हमारे, तो हम लोग सीधा प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल में चेक कराने चले जाते थे। सर आयुष्मान कार्ड चलता था, तो अब बंद हो गया, प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल में ले नहीं रहे। तो इलाज कराने के लिए सबसे बड़ा जो हमारा रास्ता था, वो हमारे लिए अब सबसे बड़ा रोड़ा बन गया इलाज में।
The Vishnu Diosai government maintains that funds are not the problem. Officials say 505 crore rupees, including the center's share, has already been released.
ऐसे हॉस्पिटल अगर लिख कर दे देंगे कि हम इलाज नहीं कर पा रहे हैं आयुष्मान से, तो हम उस पर विचार भी करेंगे, परीक्षण कराएंगे। हमारे पास जो इनपेनल्ड हॉस्पिटल है, उनकी संख्या बहुत है। सरकारी हॉस्पिटल भी पर्याप्त इलाज कर रहे हैं।
If funds are not released promptly, experts warn the implications could be severe, with disruptions spreading on much larger scale, as has already been witnessed in other states. With Sumi Rajapan, Bureau Report, India Today.
Okay, from that Get Real India story, let's bring you a good news story, and it comes from Gujarat, where in a village, a school teacher is ushering in a chess revolution. That's right. The teacher is funding his students to ensure that they become the grandmasters of the future. Take a look.
Ratu Singh Namawada, a small village in Gujarat's Mahisagar district, is chasing a dream. Almost every student at the local government lower and upper primary school is mastering moves on the chessboard. The man behind the mission is the mathematics teacher at that school.
जो मेरी सैलरी है उसका मेरा नियम है कि मैं उसका छोटा सा परसेंट अपने बच्चों के लिए निकालूं। जिस बच्चों की वजह से मैं कमाता हूं, ये पैसों पर उनका भी अधिकार है। और हमने थोड़े समय पहले एक ट्रस्ट भी किया है, इम्प्लीमेंट किया है बच्चों के लिए।
Upadhyay has bought 125 chess sets, 35 timers and numerous chess books for the students. He has even translated Emmanuel Naiman's book The Magnus Method into Gujarati to help his students. He explains that chess doesn't affect regular class.
तो वैसे तो हम एजुकेशन में कोई कॉम्प्रोमाइज नहीं करते। जो छुट्टियां होती है, जैसे कि संडे है या कोई त्यौहार आ गया, दिवाली हो, उसकी छुट्टियां होती हो, या फिर उत्तरायण है, होली है, जो समर वेकेशन होता है, उस टाइम भी छुट्टी में हम स्कूल में आते हैं और पूरा दिन छुट्टी में स्कूल में रहते हैं और बच्चों को चेस सिखाते हैं।
Many students from the school have been picked for district level chess program, which provides them free education, hostel accommodation and training.
2023 में पूरे गुजरात से 33 के आसपास बच्चों को सिलेक्शन मिला था चेस में, DLS स्कूल में। तो उस टाइम 33 में से हमारे 14 बच्चे सिलेक्ट हुए थे। उसके नेक्स्ट ईयर पूरे गुजरात में से 8 बच्चों का सिलेक्शन हुआ था। उसमें से 7 बच्चे हमारे स्कूल के थे।
परीक्षा देने गए थे DLS की, वहाँ पे हम गए थे और DLS में जाने के बाद हमें रोज सुबह शाम प्रैक्टिस करते हैं और मेरा गोल है कि मैं GM बनूं।
हम बहुत सारे बच्चे गए थे तो 14 बच्चों का सिलेक्शन हुआ, उसमें से मेरा भी सिलेक्शन हो गया था। रोज प्रैक्टिस करता हूँ, सुबह शाम दोनों टाइम प्रैक्टिस होती है हमारी। मेरा गोल है कि मैं GM बनूं और बहुत बड़ा प्लेयर भी बनूं।
Whether they eventually make it big or not, Upadhyay believes that every child should play games like chess that improve thinking skills. With Viren Joshi, Bureau Report, India Today.
Well, that's all we could pack in on the show tonight. Thanks for watching. Stay well, stay safe. Good night. Shubh Ratri. Jai Hind. Namaskar.